Today, I'd like to discuss the second five-factor trait, agreeableness. Agreeableness is essentially just the desire to get along with other people, the desire to maintain harmony. These are people who are very uncomfortable with conflict. Their primary goal is to get along. That phrase, that famous Rodney King phrase, can't we all just get along? That is kind of their motto of life. Can't we all just get along? And so agreeableness is the desire to get along with other people. Agreeable people, in terms of their traits, one of the most remarkable traits about them is their level of trust in other people. These individuals just seem almost incapable of not trusting people. One very good example, famous example of a person high in agreeableness is former President Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan was very likable. Even his political enemies liked him. He got along with everyone on a personal level. I mean, again, even people who disagreed with him politically, if they knew him, they liked him, and he got along very well. To this day, and he was president from 1980 to 1988, and to this day, political pundits still talk about how he and Tip O'Neill, who was the Democrat Speaker of the House, would go out and have drinks and got on so well together. And some of the people who didn't know him, who were Democrats, referred to him as an amiable dunce. So even though they didn't like him and they thought he was not very bright, they acknowledge that he's amiable. Okay, he was a very likable guy, and his son stated how he just could not grasp the idea that someone would not like him, that someone would betray him, or wouldn't be trustworthy, which is actually pretty striking when you consider he was in politics for a number of years. Before becoming president, he was governor of California, and yet he still maintained this optimism and this positivity about other people. It's quite remarkable. But this is who they are. People who are high in this trait, they like everyone, and they think everyone likes them. And usually they do. Even, again, people who may be at odds with them in some way. So that trusting nature is one of the most striking characteristics of these people. These are not competitive people. They are not about winning. They're about getting along. So they don't view the world in terms of us and them, or winning, or losing against other people. They're about building bridges, not walls. And so they want to work together with other people. They're not about, and of course you can win as a group, but the point is they're not focused on their individual success. So in that sense, they're not competitive. They're not interested in winning at the expense of someone else they have to interact with losing. So, and that they'd much rather cooperate with others than compete against others. They tend to be pretty honest and humble. I think humble is a good way to describe them. They're not prone to self-promotion. again, they're not about getting ahead of others. That they're and so they tend to be pretty humble people. They're not prone to bragging or self promotion, self effacing, and they're very compliant. These are people who are easy to get along with, and they tend to be rule followers. And as you might suspect, they tend to make good friends and caring romantic partners. These are people you want in your life. If you get to choose, these are people who you want in your life. They're genuinely good people. If we look at, one of the things the textbook does is it looks at the words that people who are high or low in particular five-factor traits use, and we're talking here about usually Facebook. And here we see the word clouds for agreeableness. On the right, you see people who are high in agreeableness. And there's almost a saintly quality to these people. It's mostly faith and joy. In fact, joy is the number one word, and lots of faith. Bible books of the Bible, Corinthians and Proverbs and so on. Prayer, references to prayer. So this is kind of who they are. These are people who are very positive, and again, these words kind of say it all. Now, I just would like to make one point here, mentioning how positive these people are. They have a lot in common with extroverts, and in this regard, and I'm going to come back to that before we get to the word clouds. I do want to just distinguish these people from extroverts because there's some overlap here in a way, and again, not necessarily in a statistical sense so much as in a conceptual sense. The extrovert, they have a lot in common in the sense that, as I just said, they're both positive people, positive, cheerful people. And although the people high in agreeableness are not necessarily as exuberant as the extrovert, they tend to be very positive. And again, you see that in the word clouds. They don't complain. Even if they're feeling negative, they don't complain about it. And that's, again, one of the differences with in terms of distinguishing them from the extrovert. People who are high in extroversion are genuinely happy people. They're genuinely happy people. They're not putting on an act. People who are high in agreeableness, they're not necessarily, although they're positive. I guess the point I'm trying to make with people with we have to distinguish with agreeableness what they do versus how they feel. So people who are high in agreeableness are very much concerned with how they're coming across to other people and not causing problems, maintaining harmony. So these are not people who are going to complain. Even if they're feeling unhappy about something, they're not, which they may do, they're not as inherently cheerful or happy as extroverts are, but they're unlikely to express negativity. These are people who view, there are kind of two types of people in the world. Those who really value harmony, and these people find people who don't get along and who are not high in agreeableness, they view them as difficult. But there are other people who really value, especially these days, there are a lot of people who really value what we would call authenticity. And that's not necessarily who these people are. They're not necessarily high in authenticity, because they're very much concerned socially with not saying the wrong thing and not giving the wrong impression. So it's about their motive, again, is really about maintaining harmony. That's what it's about. So and that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that they share the quality of being positive with extroverts, though they're not necessarily as naturally cheerful and exuberant as the extrovert. They're similar, and they make a very positive impression. Which brings me to the second point. They, like the extrovert, these people are very popular and well liked by others, and are likely to be leaders. The difference is that extroverts tend to be leaders because they want to be leaders. People high in agreeableness tend to be leaders because other people want them to be leaders. Big difference. Extroverts, as we say, extroverts seek out, they have that social dominance, and they actually aspire to positions of leadership. People who are high in agreeableness don't overtly aspire to or advocate for themselves for positions of power or authority or leadership. But other people around them like them and trust them so much that they tend to become leaders anyway. So it's not something that they're necessarily seeking like the extrovert, but they often are elected by other people or sought out by other people to be leaders because they're so well liked and trusted by other people. So back to the word cloud. We have the almost saintly people who are high in agreeableness. And then on the other side, people who are low in agreeableness, a very different picture. We see mostly violence and insults and substance abuse. Pretty much captures it. And so really a striking difference between people who are high in agreeableness versus people who are low in agreeableness. Now, having said that, I mean, it's easy to think that, really just from the name alone, which some people have a problem with, because obviously agreeableness sounds like such a positive thing, and it's honestly not totally as positive as it appears. And so I want to spend a moment talking about the downsides of being high in agreeableness. I mean, basically, it's there are positives at every level. It's not as though, and again, that word cloud certainly makes it appear that being high in agreeableness is a wonderful thing and being low in agreeableness is a horrible thing. Not totally, okay? And so I want to talk again about some of the problems associated with this. People who are high in agreeableness are easily exploited by other people. remember, these people trust everyone. And the reality is, we don't live in a world where we can trust everyone. There are a lot of people out there who do not have your best interests in mind. And it is prudent to be aware of that and to take proper precautions. People who are high in agreeableness don't do that. They're naive, to put it bluntly. They can be naive. And as a result, they can be easily exploited by other people. So that's one important point about these individuals. And another issue is that although they are well liked, people who are high in agreeableness have a hard time really openly expressing their feelings, which is one of the reasons people like them. They're a lot like politicians in this regard. Politicians tend to avoid saying things that other people don't want to hear. Again, they're very concerned with not offending people. And that's the way people high in agreeableness are. They're very reluctant to say things that they think might offend other people. And so in relationships, they can be a little difficult to know. And that may seem contradictory because they tend to have a lot of acquaintances, but they can be difficult to know. In fact, this is another trait that Ronald Reagan had, and his own son said he didn't really know him. And again, that seems ironic because these people have so many acquaintances and friends, but they tend to kind of keep them at a distance, or at least it comes across that way, because they don't really, part of intimacy is sharing who you are. That's part of intimacy. And until you're willing to do that and divulge, intimate details of your life, your feelings, you can't really feel close to someone without that. And these individuals often have a hard time doing that, especially people who they're not really intimately close to, like a significant other. Most of their many acquaintances are never going to really get to know them, because they may feel, and again, people are different. This is another thing. People are different in that terms of their intimacy needs and what they want out of a friendship or a relationship. Some people are perfectly content with this style. Others may feel very frustrated by them because they tend to just kind of go along with what other people want. And that's what we mean by compliant. They go along with what other people want. They're not going to tell you what they want. They'd rather defer to other people. And again, this could be frustrating for some people. And, depending on their level of agreeableness, some of them almost don't seem to even know what they want. Because they're so used to deferring to other people that they don't even really, they don't think in terms of themselves. Again, they're so used to, they're sacrificial. These are they're sacrificial people, which again is saintly. Um, so they will put other people ahead of themselves, and they sometimes do it so much that they don't even really. It's like they fuse their own needs with those of other people, that they almost don't even. Some of them who are really high in agreeableness almost don't recognize their own needs. So again, these are people who can be easily uh, exploited by other people. And so one of the ways that we see this manifested is in pay, salary. Um, Agreeable people, on average, make less money than equally qualified people who are lower in agreeableness. And this is, again, because they don't look out for themselves. They don't negotiate, which is a big part of salary in the professional world, is the willingness to negotiate. I remember once at a previous institution, we were hiring a new faculty member, and I actually recruited him, and I was with him. When you're interviewing for a job, a faculty job, you are shuffled from one office to another all day long for like 2 days. And so you meet with all the faculty in their offices, and you meet with the dean and the provost and so on. And I was with him when he met with I can't remember if it might have been the dean. I'm not sure who it was, one of the administrators. And he pulls out what I remember as almost like a scroll. Okay, it's it's paper, but it's this long sheet of paper that it was longer than your traditional paper, and it did. He had it rolled up. It almost looked like a scroll, and he pulls it out, and he's got this long list of demands of lab related things, and this is what this something like a person who's high in agreeableness would never have done that, and he was not high in agreeableness. But that's the kind of thing people high in agreeableness are not going to do. They're not going to stand up for themselves. They're not going to negotiate. They're compliant, and they will go along with basically whatever other people are willing to give them. So, I mean, that is arguably a serious downside to this trait. But and again, if that's something that someone makes a choice to do, maybe for religious reasons, that's fine. But again, there's sometimes a contradiction with these people in terms of what they do and what they really want. And often this is a style that they have developed that in some sense they're uncomfortable with. And some of them end up going to counseling or whatever, and for for assertiveness training. And so again, this is, some of these tendencies are more about just getting along. It's what they value is getting along with other people. It's not necessarily well, I would just leave it at that. It's really about the value of harmony. Okay. I think, well, I don't have a lot of time left. Um, I will, I guess, stop there, and then we will talk about people on the other side of this continuum next time.